He was rejected by an American sweetheart on The Bachelorette and later had to have his leg amputated. And somehow his belief and faith in God only got stronger. How? Stick around to find out more. Welcome back to Theology on Air. Theology on Air is an outgrowth, I guess, of Theology on Tap, which is a ministry to young adults in Houston, where we get together and we have craft beer and we talk about interesting things around theology, the Bible, faith, and culture. And if you live in the Houston area and you want to know about our events, you can go to houstontot.com to find out more. And then we get to dig deeper in these podcasts. And today is a little bit of a different podcast because instead of having like a topic or a theme, we just found a really interesting person with a really interesting story. We're just going to pick his brain. So I am Sarah Stone. I'm the Executive Director for Theology on Tap. I am here with Evan McClanahan, Senior Pastor of First Lutheran here in Midtown. That joke never gets old to me. I'm sorry. He is the only pastor, which makes him the senior pastor. So, and our guest today is the lovely Cam Ayala. I got it.
You got it right.
I don't know why it trips me up so much, but Cameron, which do you prefer?
Cam's fine. Yeah, it's easier.
So I went to a networking, a big deal in Houston. We do this every year. They do a Houston prayer breakfast. Like a bunch of cool people come together and like the mayor's there. Anyway, it was my first time and I started chatting with you and ended up sitting next to you. And I'm just thinking this is just a guy. And the next thing I hear you talking to somebody and you pulled up your pant leg and I saw you had a prosthetic. And then a few minutes later, you're like, oh, I was on The Bachelorette. I'm like, what? Either this guy is like a serial liar or he's had quite a life. So I want to talk about that today.
Okay.
So are you a serial liar?
No.
No.
Okay.
This would be a deep fake.
Yeah.
And also you can go and see that. I haven't gone back and watched it yet. I thought that might be a little too voyeuristic. Like if you know someone that's in the show to go back and watch, so I haven't yet.
And I prefer people who don't watch it.
Well,
and we'll get into that as to why.
Okay, so before we get to all the drama, we'll whet people's appetite and then we'll make them wait for it. Tell us just a little bit about like you growing up, a little bit about like your personality, maybe a little bit about your faith story. Did you grow up in a Christian home? Give us the background.
Sure. So I am a Houstonian, born and raised. I do claim Cypress, Texas as Houston because on my parents' address it is Houston technically.
Right.
So
outside the loop.
Yeah, but I would say growing up, my household was like cultural Christians, as it's kind of known now, and not even really like all of the box checking. I'd say we really started to go to church regularly, probably when I was in like 4th or 5th grade, and we went to a Church of Christ in Houston.
Oh, wow.
And so my dad's upbringing was partially Catholic, then partially Methodist. I'm not even really quite sure what my mom was growing up.
You guys landed in Church of Christ?
It's really bizarre. I guess also because of like proximity, that was also the closest church to our house, and our next door neighbors went there, and one of my best friends went there, and they had an amazing youth group. And so for me, like every Wednesday night, we would go to Yahweh Cafe, as it was called.
Wow.
Yeah.
You did not do that kind of branding like fast.
Yeah, exactly. But definitely did not have a relationship with Christ. We went to church because it's just what you did.
Yeah.
And I as I reflect now, like as a little kid, I remember a lot of specific conversations that I had with my dad about sports and about movies and music. And when we would leave church on a Sunday morning with my parents and my older sister, we'd get in the car and it's not like we were playing 89.3 KSBJ. It's like straight to 104 or 96.5, the secular musics. And so it's kind of like we just went there because it was a cultural, social thing to do. Mm-hmm. My mom and dad would enjoy the message, but when they got home, they wouldn't like get into scripture with me. Mm-hmm. I will say this, I'll give my dad credit. Growing up, he did teach me the Lord's Prayer when I was, a little child. And so like I memorized all the United States presidents in the Lord's Prayer. Like that was my thing. Exactly. But, I didn't really have that relationship with either my parents about their personal relationship with Christ. So as I got older, I'd say really my sophomore year of high school. My older sister had just graduated and started going to Sam Houston, and I allowed sports to become my religion, right?
Okay.
Like I played baseball, basketball, and football pretty competitively, and mostly basketball year round. Like I did AAU, all the traveling teams. And for me, that's how I rooted my identity, was my performance in sports and like being a leader in my peers, because like I feel like most kids get their kind of trajectory to how they're going to be in their young adult years kind of in the elementary and junior high playground or in the cafeteria. And I was kind of the class
sort of social structures.
Right, exactly. So I was kind of the class clown, but also like was seen as somewhat of a leader in my peers. So I had all those God-given like traits and gifts really, but I wasn't using that to bring glory to God.
Yeah.
And I would say I was a kind person. I did stand up for people who got bullied, but then at the same time, there were seasons in my life where I would bully other people. But I think the older I got in like high school and college, I did find leadership in my group of peers, but it was leadership for being the life of the party.
Okay.
Yeah.
Popular and fun.
Yep. And I'd say really, again, my sophomore year of high school, we stopped going to church altogether because my weekends were consumed with traveling basketball teams, and with my sister not there and me being a hormonal teenager, I just wanted to sleep in. And it was easy for my parents to say no than to like do that because they didn't have a personal relationship with Christ.
That's so crazy to me to think that, because so for years you guys did go. And would you say, like, not speaking for your parents, but for you, would you say like you believed God existed? Like he was real, but there just wasn't a connection? Or were you just sort of agnostic about everything?
So I was actually baptized when I was in sixth grade, summer of sixth grade. I went to this church camp in Winsboro, Texas. And for me, it was almost kind of like the peer pressure to do it because my best friend had gotten baptized the weekend before. And I was just like kind of caught up in my feels, like, okay, like, my best friend,
special.
Right. It's special. We're there and it's dark out. The whole camp is singing these worship songs and, you see all the stars and it almost felt theatrical. And I was also in theater. So I'm okay, let's go.
What didn't you do? Sports, theater?
Yeah.
Partied.
What's that?
Partied.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But I remember honestly, like, being disappointed when I got baptized. Like I got submerged and came out of the water. I didn't feel
Nothing
any different. No,
Yeah.
I was expecting this like out of body experience and like to visibly see the face of God or Jesus and to just be this new person.
Yeah.
And then you know how the church camp high wears off. You go home, you get then influenced by your friends, girls, partying, video games, sports, drinking, all that stuff. And that's kind of what became my idol, was being the guy that everybody liked. I was senior class president in my high school, which was nine.
Grief, another thing.
Well,
I
All these overachievers, I tell you.
Yes and no. I did it because, yes, it was kind of like a popularity contest, but like I was really wanting to be the guy that got along with everybody. Like I didn't care if you were the band nerds or you were in theater or you were literally, I went to a pretty diverse high school where there's literally gang members and I was cool with them. So I felt protected, right?
Yeah.
So
like the thing you do in jail, like be friends with the right people. Okay,
Exactly. So that was kind of like my path. And one thing that I used to always say, and now I kind of like laugh at it, and we hear it all the time, especially like my generation, I would say I was spiritual but not religious.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's just, to me, it just feels like kind of a hippie stoner way of saying you like to feel out of your body. And maybe there is some sort of connection, but there's no intimacy with Father God.
Yeah.
Son Jesus or the Holy Spirit. I didn't have that specificity.
Yeah.
And looking back, it was there. I just didn't know how to acknowledge it. I didn't know how to call it, and I didn't know how to be a good steward of it.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, so you go off to college.
Yep.
And what was that like?
So my freshman year, I played basketball at Hardin-Simmons University,
Okay.
it's a Christian school in Abilene, Texas.
Okay.
Yeah.
My grandmother went there.
A lot of people's grandmothers went there. Well, so Abilene, Texas first off, it was a dry county or dry city. So, you just had to drive like 20 minutes to go get alcohol, right? So there were ways around it. But I mean, you have Abilene Christian, you had McMurray, and you had Hardin-Simmons, which are all Christian, private Christian schools.
Okay.
So I went to a public school in 5A Houston, so like not Christian at all. So it was honestly culture shock for me. I didn't like being told that I had to go to X amount of hours of chapel to graduate. We used to call them chap naps. I'd go to the top so I could go take a nap because I was exhausted from being a basketball player. So when my health with my knee started to dwindle, I was like, you know what? I just kind of fell out of love with the game. So like I want to transfer to a quote unquote real school. And then I went to Texas A&M, where a lot of my friends that I grew up in junior high and high school with went to. And that was just opened the floodgates of partying. I joined a fraternity. Frat guy. But we weren't.
Pause on you said those. You said something about your knee. So let's start at the beginning of the trajectory of that story. So tell us about your knee and how old you were when maybe that was on your radar.
Yeah. So really, it actually even started before Hardin-Simmons. It was actually when the summer of my 5th grade going into 6th grade. So I was about 11, 12 years old.
Okay.
And I was playing like YMCA basketball. And I had a lot of lower back pain at the end of every game. And my parents just like, oh, well, you're tall. It's growing pains. That's normal. And, you know, that would make logical sense because I was a lot taller than a lot of my teammates. And so we went to an orthopedic doctor just to kind of get some, you know, preliminary x-rays. And very quickly they saw that my right leg was about 1.5 inches shorter than my left.
Good grief.
So that would explain why I'm having lower back pain.
Yeah.
But then the orthopedic surgeon just very nonchalantly said, and see those little black spots on that right femur? That looks like that may be bone cancer, but let's just get a bone biopsy to make sure it's not.
Jeez.
So no
You're
warning.
like 11, 12 at this point.
And one of my good friends, my best friend at the time, his mom had passed away from breast cancer. So immediately I'm thinking, okay, cancer is a death trap.
Right.
And I'm not even in high school yet. Like I have so much life to live, but like this is it for me. And so we had to get the emergency surgery the following week. And fortunately,
Wait, was it cancer?
It was not.
Okay.
Yeah, but we did the surgery to basically do a biopsy of the bone to make sure that it wasn't cancerous. So fortunately, it was not cancerous. But as a result of that surgery, I started going through physical therapy and rehab. And progressively, you know, typically there's going to be post-op swelling, like you have your ACL or any orthopedic surgery. That's just natural for any person. But as I was like going through physical therapy, like the swelling like got worse and worse. So at like one point, I'd say maybe 1.5 months post-op, my right leg was about 4 times the size of my left.
Good night.
Yeah.
And you're still a kid at this point.
Yeah. I hadn't even started 6th grade yet.
Wow.
So it was very tough because, you know, obviously this was 2000, 2001. So we didn't have Google image search. I mean, we barely had the internet. We had dial up and you could instant messenger, you got mail, you know? So we didn't have the accessibility to information at the palm of our hands like we have now.
Yeah.
But the blessing is growing up in Houston, you have the Texas Medical Center 30 minutes away, the largest med center in the world. So
it was the
largest in the world. Yeah. And so having accessibility to specialists was relatively easy, but having the disease that I was later diagnosed with, which is called lymphedema, it took us over a year of going to like 16 different specialty clinics in the med center. And basically when I was told I had lymphedema, it is a disease that has no cure and it is progressive in nature. And there's really 2 types of lymphedema. Primary, what you're born with, which is what I had. And then there's secondary, which is more common if like breast cancer patients, for example. So you may have heard of loved ones who get mastectomies or get lymph nodes removed underneath their armpits. And then next thing you know, their arms start to swell pretty progressively. And you may see women or some men that have those arm sleeve like compression garments. And so that's like kind of base level line of care for that. And so when I'm told by my doctor that, okay, there's no cure for it, it will get worse, and you need to avoid bug bites, you need to avoid scrapes and abrasions.
Anything that would normally swell is going to swell more or be inflamed.
Yep. And then you throw in the fact that you live in Houston, Texas, which is super humid, like I'm dealing with the elements, right? And I basically was just given this long laundry list of all the activities that I would need to avoid. And being a 3-sport athlete, baseball, basketball, and football, those are all very much contact sports where you break bones, you scrape your knees, all that. That's like inevitable. inevitable. So that was really tough because at that point, at age 11, almost 12, I essentially had to become a man and take this disease by control, because if I didn't, it would definitely control me, because we're in this constant state of battle between gravity and the lymphedema. And gravity always wins, because basically lymphedema, just high level, means your lymphatic system doesn't properly move that lymph fluid. So it causes an accumulation of swelling. And you can have lymphedema really anywhere in your body. But for me, it was concentrated to my right leg, specifically in that right knee.
But you still have it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Even after my amputation, which I know we'll get into that here shortly.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's where it all started. And I did not want my peers, my teammates, or my coaches to look at me any different. I didn't even tell my coaches most of the time that I had it. So I would wear this compression garment that just kind of looks like what you see most athletes wear in pretty much all sports. But that was kind of before it was popular, before Lululemon and Nike and Under Armour like made compression sleeves cool. So it kind of looked like I was wearing pantyhose. And I used to get taunted by the opposing teams when, you know, I would shoot a free throw. They would literally chant pantyhose. And so, but that was also kind of fuel for me to like take something that is otherwise perceived as negative and be like, well, just you watch, because this dude with a pantyhose is about to beat you.
Did you then beat them?
Not for the most part. Yeah.
Wow. I did not realize you were that young when it all started for you. I mean, it started when you were born, I guess. But wow. Okay. So you still kept playing sports. I cannot, as a mom, I'm like, that would have been like, we're done with sports. You're going to live in a bubble, you know, but your mom let you keep playing 3 sports?
She did. And my mom, honestly, is like, I don't want to say more masculine. Maybe that's not the word, but she's tougher than my father.
Okay.
And I hope they hear this, because when I was in like 7th grade, I was playing summer league baseball, and I had a coach who was very hard on us, but I'm so blessed to have a coach like that. And one of the practices, he would literally like throw, like in batting practice, he would intentionally hit us like with the ball, because I mean that happens in the game, and when you can get over that fear, then you can stand in that batter's box with confidence. And after,
do you do that to your son?
Yeah, my son plays, so we'll have to chat later. But no, but the coach who played in Cyprus, sometimes he'll throw like as fast as he can, which is about 80, 85, like just to like start to get him used to faster speeds, you know, because the kids are starting to throw faster. But he hadn't gotten hit yet. He has very good control. But yeah, you got to get over that fear, because I'm like, there's no way I would stand in that batter's box. So yeah.
Well, after about the second time of getting hit, I threw my bat down and I stormed off the field. And my mom happened to be there at that practice, and she grabs me by the arm and said, "I did not raise a quitter. No, you go out there and finish strong." And like maybe in the moment that felt like intense, but
it's like a scene from a movie.
Exactly, right? But like honestly, that made me so resilient. And after that moment, like I ended up leading the team with the highest batting average, because I wasn't afraid to crowd the play. I wasn't afraid to get hit, because I had already determined that I was going to finish strong. And if I got hit by the fastest pitch, it wasn't going to break me. It wasn't going to kill me.
Except like more than anybody else on the team, it would get closer.
Right.
My gosh, like nobody else is dealing with what you were dealing with. So it might not have killed you, but it would really hurt things.
Yeah.
Man, okay. So you're still doing all these sports. You go off to college. First, you're in this like big like Bible Belt extravaganza. Then you're in, but you said your knee started to really be a problem, so you were like backing off of sports. Is that? Yeah,
I did intramurals and things like that just to kind of stay somewhat active, but not the like full-time job like an NCAA student athlete demands of you to be.
Yeah. So did you then think like your trajectory of what you were going to do growing up? Like when you were a grown-up, what did you want to be?
Like most kids, like, you know, I wanted to be a professional baseball player, but then I wanted to be a professional basketball player, because I started doing that year-round. I'm like, well, I'll probably won't make the NBA, but I'll play overseas, or I'll be a coach, right? Like I was like all in on it, because I literally gave blood, sweat, and tears to the game.
Yeah.
So for me, having gone through the physical adversity at such a young age, like there's some athletes who are blessed who've never had an injury in their life, or if they are, they're very minor, not life-threatening or career-ending. And having gone through that at such a young age gave me a deeper appreciation for mobility in sports in general. So, but when I knew that I had kind of given it my all, my freshman year at Hardin-Simmons, I realized I could walk away from the game and not having any regrets. I got to say, hey, I played NCAA basketball. I was the first NCAA basketball player to play with lymphedema. So like I can wear that crown proudly and not feel like I should have stayed for the 3 more years and who knows what would have happened. I don't have that regret at all.
Yeah, good.
You don't have your mom's voice.
You get back out there. Yeah.
Okay, so then at that point, what did you think the future would look like as far as like what you were going to do with your life after college?
I really wasn't quite sure, but I think a lot of people who go to Texas A&M
aren't quite sure.
Well, no, they are sure. Oh. Like they have such a clear path because it's such a traditional campus where you kind of meet your person in college. Yeah. You get married a couple years after, then you start having kids and you raise more Aggies. I was first generation Aggie. Okay. I grew up an LSU fan, so for me, I just wanted to get a safe job because I had gotten into a little trouble my junior year at A&M. Wrong place at the wrong time. But most people who go to A&M, like they have like the job security of getting into the energy business. Okay, yeah. So when I graduated, I was in a electrical oil and gas job in Dallas, Fort Worth. Oh, okay. So that's where I lived right outside of college. And it was honestly college on steroids because all my best friends from A&M and some from LSU, we all convened coincidentally in Fort Worth because they had their jobs there. And these are petroleum engineers making 6 figures their first year. So basically we could afford better alcohol. And we were partying hard Thursday through Sunday, like religiously. Huh. Yeah.
So not going to church at this point.
Nope, not at all.
Take us from, I mean, at this point, you're not that far from how old you are now. So some point you're in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you're working, you're managing the lymphedema. How did you end up on The Bachelorette? That's really what I want to know. How did that happen?
Whew. So I guess an important...
Be a reality TV star.
That actually never crossed my mind growing up.
Was it just that you watched so many episodes of The Bachelorette?
Not at all. It would normally be like a source of punishment for most heterosexual men. They only watch it because they're in trouble or their girlfriend or their wives want them to watch it. Yeah. But sometimes they get hooked to it because, they're like, hey, happy wife, happy life. She's going to be into this. Maybe she'll watch, a sports game with me. But I lived in Austin from 2013 till about 2019. Okay. And Austin was not a good city for me. It was a fun city for me, but I did not have any relationship with Christ. I had a ton of complications with my leg. I started getting episodes of infection, so like over 15 knee surgeries in the course of 7 years. Good grief.
And was that prompted by something? Like you fell or... Was it just
no, it's just the natural course of the disease. And for me, the disease, the bacteria had gotten into the knee joint inside the bone. So I had developed what's called osteomyelitis, which means chronic infection of the bone. So anytime I would have a bout of infection, I would know instantly. I would run like a 102 fever. The leg would be excruciatingly painful, and I would have to get emergency surgery every time. They would have to drain it, and then I'd have to go through physical therapy. They'd have to put a PICC line IV in my arm for 8 weeks. So, I mean, it was pretty major. And so in that season of my life, I did not have a relationship with God. I wouldn't say that I was straight up atheist. Again, that was kind of the spiritual, not religious. I was smoking a lot of weed, drinking a lot, and I was very angry with whatever perception of God I had at the time because I'm like, well, I'm a good guy in my estimation, though I was having a lot of casual sex, I was always a gentleman. Like we find negotiations about it. Right. Like I'm not a savage. I'm not going to just ghost them, because if I'm very transparent, out the gate, I'm not looking for something serious and I just want something casual. Yeah. I would justify my mind. Well, it's okay to have a lot of sexual partners. Yeah. So then when I had the issues with my health, I was like, God, why are you doing this to me? And then I think after about the 13th or 14th surgery, I just kind of shut off completely. And there was a point where I remember one night, I just, though I had amazing friends and family that were there through all of the surgeries, I was never like alone in that regard. I just felt alone because there was just something missing in my soul. And I remember one night a nurse came into my recovery room and she's like, "Can I pray with you?" And that was a prayer that at the time I wasn't ready for. I should have been, but I wasn't. But that was kind of that mustard seed that was planted, because I didn't really come to have a relationship with Christ until a couple years after that. But for me, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be this strong-willed person that my mom raised me to be, never quit, fight through every one of these bouts of infection, and eventually it'll be okay. So how did that land me on The Bachelorette?
Hey guys, Sarah here. Sorry to interrupt the podcast. I know it was awesome, but I just wanted to tell you that Theology on Tap is growing. We are now a standalone ministry, an independent nonprofit, and to grow, we need your help. We're offering more live events, more follow-up opportunities to reach the unchurched, and increased partnerships with local churches. You can help us grow by praying for us, by telling your friends or church about us, and of course, partnering with us financially. To donate, go to houstontot.com/give. Okay, enjoy the rest of the show.
So as I was living in Austin, I had a pretty serious relationship with this Canadian woman. And as her visa was expiring, I kept saying, hey, we need to go see an immigration attorney, because Trump had just been elected. And so I said, when he says America first, like, he's like being literal with that. I don't care if you are friendly neighbors to the north, like Canadians get deported too.
Yeah.
And so sure enough, negligence on her end of just not truly understanding the severity of the situation. When she went to go try to get her visa renewed, it got denied. And basically, we had been dating for maybe 9 months, and we were living together.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, I love you. I know you love me. There's a very easy solution for this. Yeah. We can go down to the courthouse in Austin right now, get married. You can legally stay here, but I'm going to have to be the sole provider, because you don't just get a green card because you marry me. That could take at least a year or so before you can work at your chiropractic practice. So she basically said, I love you, but the thought of living in a 1-bedroom apartment with you gives me anxiety. And so we basically broke up.
Wasn't she already doing that?
We had a 2-bedroom.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, we were in a 2-2. And basically, we were going to have to.
She sounds like a gem.
Well, I mean,
Sorry.
I wish her well. I really do. And she was in my life in that season for a reason. I truly do believe that. Yeah. Like, God always puts people in your life for the right reason. Because I know that now. So basically, we decided we didn't want to do long distance, and we broke up. And
she went back to Canada?
She did. She literally got deported. And then, I go back to being single cam with all my buddies in Austin. In Austin, I think it's a 3-to-1 girl to guy ratio. And it's known as a very casual hookup party city, right? Okay. Typically. And there was actually coincidentally a bachelorette party that was at this one bar that me and my buddies were at. And we met this group of girls, and one of them kind of took a liking to me, and we just started talking. And long story short, she ended up being a producer. Oh. She wasn't a producer for The Bachelorette, but she had
discovered.
Well, she had worked for the franchise in the past, but she was still connected with a lot of the people who were still there. She's like, look, like, I like you, but it's not gonna work out between you and I. Okay. Like she wanted, but if I can't have you, America can have you.
Oh my gosh, so dramatic.
I know, right?
I'm here for the story.
But so she basically sent a text message, and the next day I'm at work in my little software sales job. I look at my phone and I get a call from a Los Angeles area code. I pick it up, and it was one of the casting producers. And one call led to another call. The next thing you know, I'm driving up to Dallas the following weekend for the Texas casting call. And then a month later, they're flying me out to LA for the national call. And then the day before Valentine's Day of 2019, I get the call from the director, and they said, you've been casted for The Bachelorette.
Okay, so wait, pause. Like, how did you feel about all this? Were you like excited? Were you like, oh, I'm a hunk of meat now? My mom I'll be so embarrassed. Like, where on the spectrum?
I mean, a little bit.
I'm gonna find my wife.
So a little bit of all that. So here's one little side story to, like, chronologically when that was happening. My parents were actually filed for divorce. They had been married for, at that point, like 30 so years. And my girlfriend had just gotten deported. My parents' marriage was falling apart. I was still recovering from a recent knee surgery, and I actually had a puppy that I had to rehome. At the time. Well, it really is. And I was kind of at rock bottom. And then so basically when I got the call that you've been asked to come to these other casting calls. Honestly, it was just kind of an escape.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I have kind of an interesting story. Like, my ex-girlfriend got deported. That doesn't happen every day. My parents are going through a divorce. That's not really unique, but like, I don't want to repeat their history. Yeah. I've done dating apps. I've had no problem like picking up girls in the bar. Yeah. I was tired of that lifestyle. I wanted to do something different. And I've always been like a hopeless and helpless romantic. Aww. That I felt that going in that environment, like, hey, if it's radical enough for I even brought God into it. I'm like, God, if this is what you want me to do, I'll do it. But I didn't have a relationship. Again, it was the spiritual side. I'm like, if this is in the universe and the stars align.
Nights in a row, I'll know.
Exactly. Yeah. So I did that. And unfortunately, like before I was officially casted for the season, my parents did get back together, still married today.
Oh, good.
So I was like, there is still hope. Yeah. But that's kind of how the whole process started. Honestly, like I almost said the A word. I make a fool out of myself at times, so I wasn't like worried about that.
Yeah.
I just didn't realize how fanatical the fan base was of the show until my season aired, and that's where the depression, the death threats, and all that really kicked in, especially when I was like edited as villain.
Okay, so let's get to that part of the story because so I guess there's some people that listen that don't know what The Bachelorette is, but it's one girl and a bunch of guys, and she's going to sort of get to know all of you, and she's going to maybe pick one of you to be her, huge big love and get married and all that jazz. And they do this thing at the end of every episode where they present roses to everyone that stays in, and one person gets cut every time. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay.
In a nutshell, huh?
So did you meet her before the thing, or was
no? So well, basically for me, I had kind of a competitive advantage because kind of how the structure works is when The Bachelor ends, they have like the finale of The Bachelor. They call it After the Final Rose, and at that, it's in front of a live studio audience. They then announce who the next Bachelorette's going to be.
Okay.
And so at that point, I was casted for the season, and I was already out there in LA. And basically, when I was there, quarantined in the hotel, because the first thing they do is take your phone, so you have no contact with the outside world.
Ooh, I'm out.
Yeah.
Other than that, I could probably be on The Bachelor, but yeah.
I know some people. If you want to get on it. Yeah.
I'm 46, friend. Keep going.
So basically, the producers came in my hotel room. They said, "Hey, you've been selected to meet the Bachelorette 3 days before, like the Bachelor Mansion, like driveway, the Bachelor driveway, right? If you've seen it." So I was there with 4 of my other castmates. 4 of the 20 guys basically got to meet her 3 days before in front of a live studio audience. So that was actually more anxiety built for me, because when I'm backstage in the green room, the producers, they came up to me and said, "So what are you going to say to her? Like, this is your time to shine. Like, you're getting a head start." I'm like, "I don't know. I guess I could like write her a poem or something." And they said, "No, we want you to rap for her."
No, stop.
So in front of 8 million, there is. It's on the interwebs. I had to freestyle rap for her in front of 8 million people.
Can you give us a little taste? Like, what did you say in the rap? You don't actually do the rap, but
I'll just say
I'm so embarrassed for you.
It's cringe. Like it's even cringe that I still kind of remember some of the lines, but like so I had in my pocket, I had a bunch of rose petals. Okay. And so
that's clever.
The Bachelorette was Hannah Brown, who's known as Alabama Hannah. She went to University of Alabama, and she was former Miss Alabama. I went to Texas A&M, so we're now in the SEC. Like, we're like rivalries. Okay. It's kind of like Romeo and Juliet. Almost, but not really.
FSU and UF. I'm a Florida girl. So.
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
So the last like rap line I said is, "Take my hand, let's go for a ride. This is the only time an Aggie's gonna say Roll Tide." And then I blew the roses like at her, and so that was actually the first time in Bachelor Nation history that a contestant was given a rose before the competition really ever started. Because one thing that's like really popular is the first impression rose that they give the first night in the mansion.
Yeah.
And historically in the Bachelorette, whoever gets the first impression rose like wins every time.
Oh wow.
That's like one of the like.
So there's something true about sort of love at first sight-ish.
Right. Well, for women, not all cases, but the data proves in Bachelor franchise, like most of the time, the guy who got the first impression rose wins. So I got it in before it even started. So that really inflated my ego, but it also put a huge target on my back for the guys. So first night in the mansion, I realized I'm not getting sent home. And so I got to just be kind of relaxed and chill, remove the anxiety of not being sent home night one, because that's what they always warn you. Don't cry and don't get sent home night one.
Yeah.
So I did one of the two. But anyway, so about halfway through the experience, I really needed to open up to Hannah about my lymphedema, my disease, because part of the experience is you can go on these pretty crazy one-on-one dates or group dates where they're doing like either mountain climbing or like pretty physically strenuous activities. And because I managed my lymphedema very well, most people couldn't tell that I had it. But I was still very much recovering from the surgery. So I pulled her aside, and before I did,
real quick. Did you like this girl? Did you really think, man, I could like really marry her? You know,
you kind of get what they call like Stockholm syndrome there, because the producers are really good about just like really putting this person on a pedestal. And again, you don't have your friends or family to confine in to talk common sense into you. We don't get to watch TV. We don't get to listen to music. You're just there like all day, drinking alcohol, eating food, talking about your feelings, and then maybe going on a date if you're invited to one for that day. So it
was just the thing to do to like her.
It's primal too. It was almost very like tribe primal, right? You have this beautiful woman, and you have these producers telling you all these amazing things about her, and you have these really attractive other guys around you, and they're competing for love. And so like that kind of adds fuel to the fire. So to answer your question, I don't know if I like truly, I definitely wasn't love. I can't say that. There wasn't enough one-on-one time to get that level of feeling, but I did have the physical attraction, and the conversations we did have, I felt we did have some good chemistry there. Keep going.
Okay, so you decided to open up about lymphedema.
About my lymphedema. And looking back, I think the mistake I made is I actually told the guys. I didn't tell them about my disease. I said, hey guys, that's something serious I need to tell Hannah about. Let me just have 5 minutes with her. I won't take up much time. And they're like, yeah, cool, whatever. And so basically I told her, she received it very well. I'm like, okay, the elephant has been addressed. I feel good about this.
But you had given the guys ammo, right?
Well, the producers had given the guys ammo. So about 45 minutes later, she has a conversation with another guy in the mansion, and he basically tells her that I made up this medical sob story for her to feel sorry for me and give me a pity rose to keep me around. So she comes back and Cam, we need to talk. Like when a woman looks at you that way and says that it wasn't good.
When men say it's not great either.
Exactly. When people say that. So she pulls me back and says, though I appreciate you saying that, I just have to question the timing of it. It just feels really slimy and manipulative. Yada, yada, yada. Long story short, I got sent home that night. She did not believe me. She thought that I was basically making up this story, or at least
something they could have fact checked. Like the producers could have been like, "There's medical records."
Yeah, but the producers are angling for stories, right? I mean,
absolutely.
Do they have writers there?
Because there are, but it's not scripted at all.
Yeah,
that's what a lot of people. Oh, is it scripted? They don't tell you what to say. You just do it, and they can kind of give you guidance. And actually, that's what I was like most hurt about, is because the night before I was like bawling to the producer, saying, I don't want to talk about my disease. I never talk about it. If you look at my social media prior to the Bachelorette, I didn't have anything about lymphedema on there. I hid it. I was ashamed of it. It was something that I felt was like a curse, and no woman's going to find me attractive if I have this malformation of a leg. And so for me, like having my coming out story about my disease, it was a real missed opportunity for the network to shed awareness on a disease that affects over 10 million Americans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Have they ever come back since and be like, we like screwed it?
Well, it's funny because, in the edit, they edited out every mentioning of the word lymphedema. So like you can't even hear me say it. And they made my explanation to Hannah so discombobulated that it really did feed to the narrative of me making up a story. Right. And even when I said I almost had to have my leg amputated in 2016, they had like slapstick comedy music playing underneath it. Like it was some sort of joke. So I get home and I'm super depressed, because not because I lost the love of my life by any means, but because
you were mischaracterized.
But I didn't even know that to the extent, because we don't get to watch the show before the general public. So 2 months later happens and it airs.
And you can't tell anybody, right? Like you're on a non-disclosure or whatever.
Yeah, we are NDAs. So, my closest friends and family, they obviously knew I was sent home. Yeah. And I told them like kind of what went down and how messed up and how the situation was just very messy. And they, we had a little viewing party with my family, and watching the episode when I got sent home and just how they were portraying me, like my parents, they were crushed too. And then you look at your phone and just hundreds and DMs from people like some of my childhood heroes like David Spade and Jimmy Kimmel, they're roasting me on national television, and I'm getting death threats from because people are so invested in that franchise that they say the most bizarre, messed up things, and I started to believe the things that people were saying about my character, and that was the road of depression.
Oh my gosh.
So that was my experience on The Bachelorette. And if you want to double down, Bachelor in Paradise, it was basically the same.
Okay, yeah, you went back into the belly of the beast?
Yeah, because I was promised redemption, right? And I think a lot of people, when you go through something traumatizing and you have people who you can quote unquote trust and they promise you redemption, that happens in a lot of churches too, frankly, right? You're promised redemption, or cults, and then you go into it and then you end up worse off. And for me, I was thinking, okay, well, it couldn't get much worse than it was. And sure enough, it really did. They kind of doubled down on that edit versus like propping me up. Like, okay, he's not so bad after all.
Wow.
So, and then this was obviously pre-pandemic. And so, but I go back, I'm living in Austin. And if I would go out to like 6th Street or Rainy Street with my friends, I would get noticed all the time. But then it would inflate my ego because they didn't care that I was a villain. They just wanted to talk to someone on the show and they wanted to take pictures, right?
Yeah. Okay.
And honestly, like a lot of my castmates and just people in that franchise, once they get into reality TV, they end up getting out of it and becoming like bigger womanizers or casual sexers, if you will, after the fact. I was actually more sexually active before the show than I was after because I was like, I don't want this life anymore.
Yeah.
It's not fulfilling. It's not to say that I didn't have seasons after the show where I screwed up, but I very quickly realized, okay, if you said that you were ready for marriage, like you're not living that life. And it was actually a podcast from Pastor Eric. That was the first I ever heard of the Story Church or Maybe God podcast. The episode was, Are You Your Dream Date's Dream Date?
Ooh,
and that wrecked me because I feel like...
Just for our listeners, that's a local church here, The Story. Eric Huffman's the pastor. And you go to that church.
I do. And the whole synopsis of it is like, we have oftentimes such high standards for what we expect in a partner or spouse. And if we have those expectations, are we living that ourselves? And I was not. So that wrecked me. And that led to me asking Eric for coffee. And then he's like, man, you got to pop open this hood. There's a lot of work that needs to be done in your spiritual life.
Wow.
And so that's where it all kind of started.
So post Bachelorette and Bachelor in Paradise, and then pre-listening to Eric, you were just still in this sort of like, you're depressed, you're doing some soul searching, but you're still in the kind of spiritual, not religious. So what even made you listen to that podcast?
I was pursuing a girl who went to the story. Yeah. And she was actually my older sister. It was her. My sister's a teacher. It was one of her colleagues, older sister. So like, oh, hey, we should set them up. Okay. And so we hit it off very well. And she's like, hey, I don't know like where you are with like your faith or like with God or whatever, but there's this really cool podcast of a local pastor. You should just check it out. Okay. So in my mind, I was thinking, okay, she's giving me the playbook.
I'm going to get some intel.
Yeah. Just like I love watching rom-coms because it's like, it tells you how to be the prototypical man, right? Yeah. So what started out as impure intentions of being curious about God just to win this girl over ended up with me getting a relationship with Christ. I didn't end up dating the girl, but I got a relationship with Christ, which is far more fulfilling for me and what I needed all along.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I didn't know that part of the story. So now did you want to say something?
Well, I wanted to ask, and this actually goes all the way back to pre-Bachelor even, where you're talking about kind of being like in Austin and, so one of the things the church is always trying to do is like how to reach those people. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, like, were you reachable? Like, was there something that somebody could have done? Or do we just kind of have to sit around and wait, if you will? That sounds kind of depressing, but, like, do we have to wait for people to have either a relationship or an experience or kind of a come to Jesus meeting is what we might call it, or rock bottom or something, where then they come kind of find us? I wonder about that as a pastor. I'm like, can we even do anything? Or do we just have to wait for people to finally come to their senses and come to us,
That is a fantastic question. I haven't been asked that before, but like just kind of reflecting, I think God uses broken people to fix other people. And by that, I mean, one of my good friends in Austin who I had grown up with, he got really into the music scene and like managing some pretty cool bands in the area. And we kind of fell out of touch, but I knew he got really big into drugs and almost kind of a cult-like situation. And he grew up Southern Baptist. Like his mom was like Miss Southern Baptist, like always going to church, always volunteering. And I remember in 6th grade, we got in trouble for listening to Outkast, and she like brought the CD and broke it in half, and like it was like a whole thing. And so when my friend who I saw like just so broken, when he came back to Christ, that was like another seed that was planted in me. So to answer your question, is there anything you can do? I mean, I don't know that there's a silver bullet. You just kind of have to meet the people where they're at. And I feel like a lot of secular people, or maybe people who even grew up religious and then grew out of faith because of college or whatever circumstances, they can see a traditional church and be intimidated or even have some PTSD about it. That's why I think things like Theology on Tap is so awesome, because you can take something social like having a couple beers and then having just open conversations without being preachy about it. And one of the things I guess that drew me to the story was their whole mission statement is it's a church for skeptics, right? How do we reach non-religious believers to form a relationship with Jesus? To me, that felt a little bit of a more welcoming for where I was at in my life, because I was so stubborn. I felt that I had the answers. I felt that, man, organized religions is just a bunch of people fighting over who has the coolest imaginary friend. That's what I felt it was, because I knew Christians who were hypocrites. I had Jewish friends who were amazing people. I had Muslim friends who were not so great of people, and like all over the spectrum. So like, how can I discern that Christ is the one true way? It was difficult to me. So I just said, you know what? This is overwhelming. I'm just going to be spiritual. I'm going to lead with love. I'm going to be kind to people. And that, like, you know, the old Bob Marley song, "Love was my religion." That's how I was trying to navigate that. So it's difficult, but I think having any type of community outreach, music's a great way to do that. It doesn't have to be like gospel songs, but there's a lot of really good singer-songwriters who have put out gospel albums, or just songs that speak to the gospel, maybe not in like a preachy way, but I guess everybody responds differently to it on their journey. But for me, it was witnessing other broken people, seeing them come to Christ. I'm like, wow, like I've tried to do everything on my own accord. I've tried the drugs, I've tried the alcohol, I've tried women and other ways of the world to satisfy my soul, and it was not working.
Would you say, and we are going to get to talking about your leg here next, because man, time is flying. Would you say that there was like a conversation or a moment, or maybe even a little season within, while you're meeting with Eric, you're maybe going to church, I guess at this point, where like something clicked, or if something was switched in you that, you know, was like, oh, okay, I used to believe this, now I believe this?
Yeah, it was very clear to me. So we were at, it's called Leading Men. It's like a men's discipleship group. And I had never done Bible studies. I thought it was just a bunch of cheesy Christians getting together to get like scholarly about it. And that just felt overwhelming to me, because I felt so biblically illiterate. It was intimidating me. But when it was phrased, it's not just about reading the Bible, we pray together too. And one of the guys at my table, he said, look, you know, your relationship with God, it's not transactional, right? Like, I feel like some people view it as, for me, it was all about like withdrawals. Like, God, what can you do for me? I'm going through this leg pain. Help me, God, help me, God, help me, God. There wasn't any gratitude, and there was no servitude on my end. So he said, it needs to be about deposits and withdrawals. It's got to be back and forth. And I hadn't really thought of it in that light before, because I felt, well, you can just be kind to people and that should be good enough. But I wasn't doing anything to bring glory to God's kingdom specifically, right? I wasn't doing any type of mission work or outreach. My prayer life was, you know, it lacked specificity and it lacked intimacy with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. It would just be kind of this God blob. Hey, God, thank you. Thank you, Father Jesus. You know, exactly. So it really took me having that mentorship from other men who are more mature in their faith journeys to kind of like guide me along. I mean, that's kind of what discipleship is about, is training other men to then have them be able to go do that and make disciples in all the nations.
Okay. Man, that's so cool. And it's like, it's nice to hear that it works. You know what I mean? It's nice to hear that there are churches, even here in our city, where they're reaching people, and then discipleship is really discipling people, which is really, really cool. Okay, so let's go to the other big story here. So all along, through the Bachelorette, through college, everything, you've been dealing with your knee, all of these surgeries, all of this pain.
Yep.
I mean, I remember listening. I listened to both of the podcasts you were in with them. You talking about, there was like one night where the pain was so excruciating.
Yeah.
You were basically like almost asking for death.
Well, I did. I asked my father to get a shotgun. And I can't imagine as a father what that would have been like for him to hear your son like laying in your master bedroom screaming like a grown man, 31 years old. Like it felt like someone was taking a hacksaw to my leg. And I felt I had a pretty high pain tolerance because 15 prior surgeries. I thought, I'm tough as nails, but there was something wrong. And it turns out I had a blood clot from my knee replacement. So it's when the EMS came to escort me to the emergency room that they had to inject me with ketamine, which is basically a horse tranquilizer, and they use it in sedation and actually use it in the therapeutic setting for like PTSD and depression. And they've had a lot of studies in the VA hospital with veterans. And I'd never had any experience with it. I'd tried like psychedelics in college and something like, oh, okay, I can handle this. I'll never forget the EMS lady. She says, right before she injects into my arm, she says, Mr. Ayala, I'm about to inject you with ketamine. You're likely going to have an out-of-body experience. So I'm like,
she warned you.
Hoorah, right? So she inject. I was like, anything to get out of this moment of the worst pain of my life. So she does it, and probably within 5 seconds in real time, it's kind of like that scene in like Pulp Fiction when Uma Thurman gets the adrenaline shot, and she's like, ugh, like comes to life. But like for me, my body literally felt like it was floating, and part of it was there was 4 EMS guys literally hoisting me up to then get me on the stretcher. I had this vision that was so clear of Christ reaching down and like grabbing my arm, and all I could remember hearing was, "Be calm, my child. Be calm." And that was the moment that it's like, okay, I had believed before, but now I'm all in. And again, like having a rock bottom moment in the moment of like terrible pain. And I don't want to say it was like life or death, which you can die from a blood clot. So I guess technically it kind of was, but I wasn't like bleeding out.
Sure, but still.
But it was a very serious medical moment. And that is when I just was overwhelmed with the Holy Spirit. And to like visually see it, like changed everything for me, because I've always been like a visual learner myself. You got to see it to believe it. And that's not to say I don't want like the listeners or watchers to say like, oh, well, I guess I have to do ketamine to go see Christ or to have that moment.
I feel like we should say that.
Right.
Not about that.
No, but it's God can, well, God's always there, but it's in those moments where you need him the most. And if you wholeheartedly and you let your guard down, like that was the most vulnerable I ever was in my life, that he just embraced me and gave me that peace.
When you were baptized at camp.
It's what I want. Exactly.
Yeah.
100%. I haven't thought about that until now, but that's it. That's it.
Okay. So you're hauled off, and where are we in the story to when you finally made the decision? Yeah.
So that was, the blood clot was because I had a failed total knee replacement. That was like the last ditch effort to save my leg.
Is that what you were talking about when we were sitting next to each other at the breakfast? Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So the knee replacement essentially failed. It was the wrong hardware. Won't go into that, but basically I was, then going to another orthopedic doctor, and they said, well, we can do a revision or we can do an amputation. And he said the revision's got to be 3 more surgeries over the course of a year, and then it may not work.
Right.
At that point, I said, you know what? What I've learned in my relationship with Christ is the most powerful thing you can do as a human being is surrender. I was surrendering to my flesh because it's not my flesh anymore. It's God's.
Yeah.
And looking back, the most beautiful breakthroughs I've had in my life came from the hardest moments.
Yeah.
And I knew that the amputation was not going to kill me. I knew it was only the beginning of a new, beautiful journey. And like, though I'm losing a leg, I'm gaining a deeper level of intimacy with God. I can use this platform that God has given me to be some beacon of hope or inspiration to say that, you know, God doesn't do things to you. He does it for you. And for me, it's been the biggest blessing. We're coming up on almost a year now. I had it on June 22nd was my amputation date. Since then, I've gotten to do, like 6 months after my amputation, I went and did a humanitarian trip to Ukraine.
That's crazy.
Bringing prosthetic supplies to Ukrainian civilians. And then coming up this September, I'm going to be doing a mountain climb, 19,000 foot mountain climb in Ecuador.
Same.
To raise funds for.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
To raise funds for kids. No. Because one thing that the amputation and really my faith journey has taught me is like my new favorite saying, which is faith over fear. When you go through what I have physically, I'm not afraid of the flesh. I'm not afraid to die. In fact, one of my favorite books is Radical by David Platt. And he said, you should be living as if death is the reward. And I think people are afraid of death itself, but you don't realize like paradise is waiting for you on the other side. Now, that's not to say we live recklessly, right?
But try to die or something.
Right. But the things of this world and of the flesh that used to scare me don't scare me anymore. I can go do prison ministry and not be afraid that something's going to happen to me there. Because if you truly believe that God has gone before you, like there's so much peace in that. And that's really been my whole thing. Like now as a single person, you know, I used to be like so gung ho, like, oh, I got to get on the dating apps. I got to find somebody. But like now I've just surrendered to that and say, you know what? Like God may not even want me to be married, and that's okay too. Like I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with where I'm at and use each day as a gift to live in God's presence and to do what he says, which is to be obedient to him and to serve other people.
Yeah, I love that. But also, if you're watching and you think he's dreaming, you should come to Theology on Tap. Sorry, I have to be opportunistic, you know?
Yeah.
We have we've had various people that have met at Theology on Tap using our Blue Cup system and got married.
Was there any Bachelor follow-up, given that that was the device they used?
Proof now.
I mean, I hate to be so crass about it, but I mean,
so when 2 days before the amputation, I had one of the executive producer's cell phone and I texted him. I said, Louis, hey, this is probably going to get some media coverage. Do you guys want to get in front of it or do you want to hear it from other sources? No response from him. And I reached out to one of my other friends who was one of the actual good producers, because not all the producers were great. She actually had a kind heart, and she's from Houston, so we kind of had that kindred connection there. She did have me go on one of the podcasts that Ben Higgins, the Almost Famous podcast. Ben Higgins was a former Bachelor that he does. So it was like somewhat associated, but nothing directly from the franchise. Because every now and then on some seasons, they'll do like, what are they up to now? Right? They haven't reached out to me for that. But, you know, there's been other cool media platforms like People Magazine, Entertainment Tonight, Us Weekly that have covered the story. And the most amazing thing about that, it's not about me. It's not about the vanity of that or getting vindication. The thing that I find most incredible about that experience is that they have quoted me talking about my faith, which is really unheard of in most of these secular entertainment platforms.
Yeah, they'll edit that right out.
So that is been the biggest blessing.
They're going to edit it right out?
Yeah, in most cases they do.
Yeah, they control what gets said. So,
and several of them, they like even in the headline, faith over fear. And like, because one of the main questions is, well, how are you coping with all this? I would be losing my mind. I said, look, I have had the strongest relationship with Christ that I've had in my entire life. And that's who I give the credit and the peace to. Yeah. That's how I'm able to get up every morning and put my leg on one leg at a time.
We haven't had any jokes. I know you have all these like one-liners and but yeah. Wow, what a story. I mean, I have all.
Well, I mean, coming full circle.
If you're only listening, you just missed. That's crazy. He just basically swung his leg around 360.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm a little squeamish, even with prosthetics, apparently.
So that's one reason for people to go to YouTube and watch instead of just listening.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you have any follow-up questions? I mean, I have a million, but I mean, we're kind of at time.
Yeah. No, man. I really appreciate the story. So, I wonder if there's any like athletic inroads for you, like in terms
Glad you asked. I'm on the Houston Rollin' Rockets. I'm on the men's wheelchair basketball team.
Okay.
And then I'm also on the sitting volleyball team. So at the end of this month, I'm trying out for the U.S. national team.
Oh, very cool.
I'm staying as active as I can with that. And I just got my first running blade. So this is just an everyday prosthetic for like walking. It's, robotic there. But then you may have seen the Paralympics with the little running blade. Yeah, it looks like a little hook. So I'll get to run for the first time in 8 years in about a week and a half. So I'm really excited for that. And I do a lot of volunteering with a thing called the Challenge Athletes Foundation. Cool. So, movement for me has been a big part of my recovery and therapy because it's easy to just get caught up laying in bed. Oh, let everything heal. And like, yeah, it heals. But for me, phantom pain is really bad. That's where you feel pain in the part where your leg used to be. Like every now and then my right calf or right ankle will kind of feel like it's burning or it feels like there's ants crawling on it. But I don't have a right calf or ankle anymore, but my brain, it's like a neurological thing. So there's different ways to mitigate that. And for me, movement has helped that a lot. So I started doing CrossFit like 2 weeks after my amputation.
Is that recommended?
Probably not. Probably not.
Like slow down.
Yeah.
It's the overachiever, So.
It's your mom still from that baseball game.
Yeah, I didn't raise a quitter.
Oh my gosh. Good job, Mom.
Yeah.
I will say, I think, for you, the kind of dividing line is you keep talking about this personal relationship with Christ, and some traditions like ours, we don't talk about that a lot, to our detriment probably, but in part it's because we kind of have this different theory about conversion and maybe even baptism plays a role in that. Sure. Kind of the idea of like, you bring people into the faith and you don't have to have this one moment of conversion. And there's reasons for not wanting to overstress that. Sure, but maybe, is that something you think churches should talk about more? Like, challenge their people to, look, you really do need to have a personal relationship with Jesus in case it needs to be said.
Yeah. Because I forget what verse it was or is about, when you die. And then one of the biggest fears is like, he's saying, I never knew you.
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah. Right. And so oftentimes, and you see this I see it on social media all the time. They say it's not about religion, it's about relationship, right? Like anybody can go to church and can quote scripture and can even do good acts of service. But if that's coming from an empty vessel where you don't have like an intimate relationship with Christ, like it's kind of like you're missing the mark because there's so much joy in that. And I feel like when you really experience God's grace and mercy and salvation, it is heightened when you have that personal relationship. No different than a relationship with a friend, right? Like you can have an acquaintance and if so-and-so say, oh yeah, John forgives you. And if I barely know, I'm like, okay, cool. But like if it's a close buddy of mine who I feel I really hurt and he comes up to me and Brandon says, Cameron, I forgive you, my brother. Yeah. That's where it really has an impact, that relationship, that deep, intimate relationship. And it shouldn't be any different than our relationship with Christ. Now, I get talking about it can be a bit of a challenge because you don't want to say, well, you need to go have a near-death experience or you need to go do ketamine or rely on your feelings. Yeah. Exactly. Because if I relied on my feelings, like even now to this day, the enemy is really good at distracting me or really good at placing doubt in my head. And I have to rebuke that and I have to stay in that intimacy with God through prayer and through doing acts of service to other people in his name. Yeah. Not for my own doing.
Yeah, man. By the way, fun fact, after I met you at the prayer breakfast and I followed you I went to Instagram, I realized I'd actually been following you, even though I didn't know you, through, I think, maybe at least Myers or some other, like, sort of like a quasi-celebrity, like an Instagram. I don't know who it was. I don't know. But at some point, something about your story about lymphedema came up, and someone was like, oh, check out this guy. It was before the amputation. Yeah. So I had already been following you. So that's really cool. I mean, that I didn't even know you, but you were getting that word out and giving God glory. And
that's what it all comes down to. Because if you would have asked me 3 or 4 years ago that I would be here in a church doing a podcast.
Still tell people that the studio's in a church.
Or just, where I'm at now with my relationship with Christ, I would have been like, okay. Yeah. Did he drink the Kool-Aid too? Like, no, that's not at all what it is. And again, God puts us all on these journeys for a reason, right? It's not going to be a super linear path. And I'm glad it's not linear because I don't think I would appreciate God's grace and mercy as much as I do now. I have not been so broken before.
Yeah. Man, well, we could ask a million more things, but since we are kind of out of time, if people want to learn more about you, follow your journey, how can people find you and learn more?
My AOL Instant Messenger. We were talking about that earlier, or on MySpace. Instagram.
Angel Sparkle.
Yeah, Instagram's probably the best way to reach out to me. And I actually do, for the most part, try to respond to DMs the best I can. But yeah, Cameron Ayala. That's the best way to find me on the Instas.
Said Cameron because it's not spelled like you would think Cameron is.
Right, yeah, because Cameron Ayala was already taken and Cam Ayala was already taken too, so I had to do Cameron.
Oh, so your actual name is spelled how?
Cameron.
Oh,
the real way, yeah. It's just an
Okay,
Insta thing. Yep.
I thought your parents were being like, cool.
No, they're not that cool. Love you, Mom and Dad, but sorry.
Okay, awesome. And like I said, maybe we can convince him to keep coming to Theology on Tap and you can meet him here in person. So, but thank you for listening. And again, if you need any information about our upcoming events, we have some really cool ones. I don't know when this podcast is coming out, but if it comes out before August 15th, Dr. James Tour is going to be coming and speaking, which will be really neat. So check out everything we have going on at HoustonTOT.com. And until we see you again, we encourage you, as always, to question freely, think deeply, and disagree as needed.